So welcome everybody, and I'm welcoming everybody online as well. If you guys have any technical issues, if you can't see my presentation or you're not able to hear me, please call the library at 467-2922 and let them know. And they will do some tech troubleshooting and let me know, because I can't necessarily tell from my end what, how is it looking for you guys on Zoom. So, but welcome, I'm really glad to have you guys all here. I'm excited to talk about this. We decided to do this presentation, I think last fall, when we knew our summer reading program theme was going to be dive into reading. And I was already thinking about doing history of Oleo Cemetery presentation, and I was going to do one in February on the history of the Moody family in Eureka, and so doing one on the history of Eureka Lake, I thought was just a natural tie-in with summer reading, so I was super excited to kind of delve into it and learn more about the history myself. So I am going to go ahead and get started. So the lake, as you may know, was created in 1941, primarily just to solve the city's water issues. But it just became its own thing. I mean, probably we don't even really think about it being part of the city water supply. We just think it's more all the memories that we have of the lake over the years since then. And this is a picture from the Woodford County Historical Society. This is Joni Johan and Chip.
Oh,
Johan out at the lake and the swimming beach.
Oh, how sweet.
Okay, so at first, in Eureka, when the town was founded, people pretty much had their own little wells and stuff. In and around the area, they had their own wells. In 1886, a water committee was first established, and they were going to try to put in some water systems for primarily the downtown area. So they acquired land at North Calendar Street and authorized a bond issue for a well to be dug there. And a 60-foot round brick water tower was built. And it had a wood thing on top. This picture here is of that one, and this picture is about 1904. So this was on North Calendar Street. The new water committee developed regulations for the water mains and fire hydrants. The water mains at first only covered the business district, though, so not all the residential areas. Sorry, a minute here before I started. So they started getting water supply going, but this is an era where there were just massive fires that were taking place in businesses. So there were really large fires in 1888, 1894, and 1898. Which led to the establishment of the first fire company in 1899, and an ordinance requiring brick construction downtown, which I thought was interesting because I never really thought about the fact that, you know, all the downtown is, you know, mostly all brick because of that regulation to help with fire prevention. The water tower on North Calendar Street was abandoned, and about 1905, the city purchased land north of the jail and drilled a second well. They constructed a water plant there for about $7,700, and water was pumped by a gasoline engine and held in a pressure tank. This would, I calculated out, in today's dollars, it's about $266,000. So that was 1905. In 1906, it was reported to cost about $100 a month to operate and pumped 400,000 gallons per month. Water users were billed $6 a year. Ooh. Bask in those numbers. Those are awesome numbers there. So even though they had this new water system, they had this new well on north of the jail, there was still just a water problem. And between 1906 and 1911, the city passed an ordinance requiring water meters. There was a minimum 70 cents a month charge for that. In 1911, it was reported there was progress, starting with the meters. They had 40 users with, but they still had ways to go with 75 that didn't. They found that the new well north of the jail was again insufficient. I think the problem with, I was reading through this, the problem was that there wasn't a good deep well or deep water source here in Eureka. It was all shallow wells. So they had a number of shallow wells that they were using water from, but it just wasn't enough to supply all the water needs. So there were numerous attempts to find wells. I heard there were 2 that were attempted at abandoned coal mine shafts around the town. In 1915, they expanded the system with a $17,000 bond issued to purchase new mains and fire hydrants. They were still trying to find workarounds to improve what they had. But issues continued. There were complaints of high mineral content and frequent shortages. There were additional big fires. In 1919, the elevator caught fire, and in 1923, the Tabernacle at Eureka College caught fire. And I found the newspaper article for the Tabernacle fire, and it was really interesting. The top paragraph was like, oh, they're gonna start work on repairing the Tabernacle, basically tomorrow or something. A new roof's being put on. And then the second paragraph was, the above was put into type last evening, but is useless as a news item now. For about 2 o'clock the morning, it burned to the ground.
Oh my goodness.
So they had construction materials and everything laid out and ready to go, and it all caught fire and all burned up before they could get started. They think it might have been vandals. At least according to this news article, they were wondering if it was vandals and stuff. But so there was just still these fires coming up. So discussions of creating an impounding lake were held as early as the 1920s. So there were occasional mentions of it in the Woodford County Journal in the 1920s of a discussion of it. But getting in February of 1930, then numerous public meetings were held, and they really started talking about, do we need this, do we need this? And it was really hotly debated. There was a lot of pros and cons to it. The cost was estimated to be $90,000, and bond issues would total $51,000 in addition to, and I quote, further indebtedness. And think about this, in 1930, we're right getting on the cusp, well, we're in the Depression, and it's, kind of touch and go there. So it was brought to a vote. A special election was held on September 16th. There were numerous newspaper articles like, the water committee trying to put out as much information as they can, but then you had like newspaper editors that maybe were against it, and they were kind of putting counter information out there. And so I like this is study all reports put out before making your decision, which is still true today, I think. You want people to be informed before they make a vote on it. So they had all kinds of stuff. They're saying, in the last 20 years, there's been spent for wells a very large sum. And the capacity of all the city wells will not keep one fire stream going, and 2 or more are often wanted for a fire. So they were just saying, we're just short. We need something bigger. So they held a special election, and it was voted down 591 to 61. That is a sound defeat.
Yeah.
Probably somewhat humiliating for the water committee that they just could not get people behind it. The editor of the Woodford County Journal, who we'll see later, was definitely anti-lake. He had a little clip in there. However, the people of Eureka may congratulate themselves more and more so daily that they have the good sense to stay out of the clutches of an impounding system, burdensome expense. So they thought, oh, we turned it down. This is good. We don't need this. 2 years, so right after that special election, the city council had a backup plan. So they solicited bids for a 100-foot tower with a $100,000 gallon tank, just to that's their backup plan. Okay, we can't get the lake, what are we gonna do? Let's put up another tower. And according to what I read, this was constructed on Major Street. So I don't know if that's the same location as the one north of the jail, because that would have been about north of the jail. So that I'm not exactly sure at. So that was 1930-31. The following year, there was another major fire in Eureka, which destroyed the brick Eureka Christian Church. The Woodford County Journal, though, claimed that the loss was not due to a lack of water at all. And in fact, I found this quote really interesting about the church fire, because it references back to the vote a couple of years earlier. And it says the Eureka water has a water supply adequate to meet any emergency was shown Monday. When the firemen were playing 3 lines of hose on the burning building, all the water used was being pumped from the west or shallow well. Neither of the other 3 wells were called into use. The Journal calls attention to the city's good fortune in as much as about 2 years ago, we were deluged with a flood of talk about the shortage of water, and especially of the folly of depending on the West Well for anything of a serious nature. So again, the Journal editor at that time really was in favor of any sort of water system, or at least impounding lake system. So the church burned not due to a lack of water or anything from all accounts. It was just kind of pretty much raging out of control by the time they were able to get it started. So second push for a lake began in, well, the concerns continued through the 1930s. So they kind of put that issue to rest in 1930, but it still kept coming up and coming up over the years. The Water Committee especially kept expressing their concerns over the supply issues. So in March of 1940, it was reported that the present supply was not satisfactory in quality or quantity. The remainder of 1940, in the newspapers at least, was an endless debate over engineering studies, the failures experienced by other towns who created lake, like I believe Lake Bloomington. That was about the same time period. So there was a lot of, oh, well, they didn't really like it. They put that in and it didn't work out and stuff. And the proposed cost of the venture, which I thought was interesting because it's $70,000 in 1940, where it was $90,000 10 years earlier. So I found this map in the Woodford County Journal, which I thought was really interesting to think about. There were 3 possible locations being discussed at that time. So the first one would have been north of the Kruger elevator, kind of out where the Mount Zion Cemetery is, Mount Zion Road. I think right there where the creek kind of goes through, there's kind of a low spot in Moline. That was one of them. That northern part of the Kruger Township would create a 300-acre lake 4 miles long with a depth of 15 feet. So that was one proposed site. The next proposed site was our present-day lake site, central part of Kruger Township on a tributary, which would create a 35-acre lake about 1 mile long with a depth of about 18 feet. And then a third location was discussed in the southern part of Kruger Township, which would create a 100-acre lake about 2 miles long with a depth of 50 feet. So that would be, so I kind of like imagining in my head, oh, what if the lake was, north of town, just kind of like, that would be, we're so close, used to having it right here. What would that have been like having it a little bit further out? The central Kruger Township option was the preferred option in 1930. I saw a reference to that. The land was owned by W.O. Davidson, the Davidson family. He died in 1933, but again, by the time this rolled around again in 1940, that land was still the preferred option out of those 3. So the city council pushed ahead. They were really wanting this. So they went ahead and in December of 1940, they approved the sale of bonds. And then in January 1941, an ordinance was passed authorizing the construction of the lake and associated water systems. And that ordinance would be official in 21 days unless a petition was presented requesting it be brought to a public vote. So, yep, a petition was signed. A petition was signed by 180 voters. It was presented and the issue was put on the April 15th ballot. Again, there was a lot of discussion in the papers, still continuing from 1940 on. This column on the left was put out by A.E. Potts, who was at this time, the former publisher of the journal. He was the one that was really kind of anti-lake. So he really was pushing that, our water wells are, are time-tried, they're pure. We don't want to assume all the debt for an unnecessary recreation pond. He really was kind of pushing that this was not something we should be doing. So vote no. So the election was held on April 15th and much different outcome this time around. It passed 584 to 311. So bigger turnout, but it did pass in favor. So they said by a vote of almost 2 to 1, they approved it. And then the city kicked off right off the bat, with going forward with it. So this picture here, This picture here is, it doesn't come out very well on this, because a lot of these are like newspaper clippings or out of books, so the quality isn't 100%. But it's looking east towards what would become Eureka Lake circa 1940s, and nice gently rolling hills and timber. A lot of the information and pictures I got were out of our 2 Eureka history books, which I've got over on the table. And then also Woodford County Journal articles was where I got a lot of my information.
Would that picture kind of be Lake Road, sort of?
Roughly, I know they built a new road when they started construction of the lake, so it's whatever road was there prior to that. That looks a little bit straighter than Lake Road.
Yeah, well,
So construction began right away. So that was April 15th. By May of 1941, bids were approved for construction of the dam, spillway, filtration and pumping plant, and a transite, which is the type of material, pipeline to connect with the city mains. The total cost was estimated to be under $60,000 for them. Work started with the clearing of timber in July and the creation of a new roadway, which to me, I assume that is Lake Road. 17,000 cubic yards of dirt were moved to build the concrete dam. And then, when they hit October, just a couple months in, 6 inches of rain fell in the midst of their construction project and halted everything. They were just like, torrential rains for days, 6 inches, and you guys all know how that floods down there. It just filled up the lake really fast. So, the article on the right is, Eureka's Lake is now an actuality. We don't have to actually wait for this to start. It's happening. So it quickly filled the lake 14 feet deep. So a couple of pictures that we have that are out there of making Eureka Lake, some of the equipment there. It looks like maybe around the dam area, hard to see. And then these photos were compiled by Mike Tolliver. He had a website at one time on the natural history of Lake Eureka. So these come from, I imagine, the Colburn families, the Davidson families, the Woodford County Historical Society. Anyway, that's where he pulled all these letters together. So I don't have a lot of information other than these are all when that torrential rainfall was falling and there's a huge increase in the lake. So you can definitely see the concrete dam there and the tractor. I guess a workman's shed was out there somewhere along the dam, and that started floating away. It looks like, it does look like they've got a crane where they're trying to pull it out. So additional pictures of just, the lake and the water filling up and everything. I couldn't tell you what direction or angle those are taken from exactly, but they're really just interesting pictures. And, more pictures of what that looked like in the early 1941 as it started to fill up really quick. And of course, there was a long held rumor about there being a piece of machinery down there. 2018, we did not see that machinery pop up. No machinery, so that rumor to rest.
When you go back one,
Yeah.
the lower right, I think that's across from where the bandstand would kind of be. I'm guessing.
Yeah, possible. Hard to sound. It is really hard to tell. It almost
There's
looks like
that
there's a boat
abandoned
out
road
there
on the
too.
other side,
Yeah.
because that probably connected down to the corner where Casey's is at, if you think about it.
Possible.
And I'm looking over at the other side of the road there in the last picture. Because right now, I think this one, there's a bunch of trees and stuff along here, and some of them are really down close to the water now. Of course, there's been erosion.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I feel about that this is going down towards the spillway here and in front of the pavilion and stuff.
Okay.
And
Looking
so
at it from that
this
angle.
out
Okay.
here is still true today. If you have a boat, you go out here, that's where I see older gentlemen in their little boats pulling in crappie.
giving away the good fishing spots. All right, so by November of 1942, construction was nearing completion. There was a break in the wet fall weather. And by January, the residents were ice skating on the lake. And they actually had to put out a warning. Newspaper article on the right, skaters on lake warned to take their own risk. So people were starting to use it already, even though they weren't even quite finished with it yet. So they were out there skating and parties with school children, college students, and grown-ups were out there. So it became already, was starting to be used, but they were just wanting to put out there, was not always a good idea. And I like especially the line says, let's see, anyway, there was a line somewhere, oh, skaters are warned to keep clear of deep water and to keep off the lake when the ice becomes thin. Very important. You don't ice skate when it's thin, yeah. Not a good idea. So in the spring of 1942, families and organizations were already having picnics alongside the lake. There were all kinds of articles about picnics being held on the lake, even though it wasn't really officially going yet. In early May, the lake was stocked with about 4,000 fish, crappie, bluegill. They said a few black bass and a few warmouth bass. Over 150 residents came out to see the fish being released, because that was an event. However, fishing was not allowed that first year or so, just in order to allow the fish to be established and everything. So no fishing that first year. The entire water system was finally ready for operation and was running on by the 11th, of May of 1942. So early reports started the water was softer and tasted good. So about a year. So they had the vote on April 15th. By the following May, it was running. A second batch of 3,000 fish were released in the fall of the Eureka Sportsman's Club. So residents were starting to swim in the lake as soon as it was completed. Sorry, I'm glad that popped up, otherwise I might not have finished it. So residents were starting to swim at the lake as soon as it was completed and the water was starting to warm up in 42. On June 4th of 1942, the Journal reported there was some rowdiness, which landed a few men under arrest, and that would be the newspaper article on the left, where some young ladies encountered some men that were skinny dipping, and so they got put under arrest and fined. And then, very sadly, the very next week was when we had the first drowning. Robert Newman, age 17, from Washington, drowned just a few feet from the shore on the deeper west end of the lake. Firemen and legionnaires aided in the search. The doctors tried to revive him once he was found. But so this was our first casualty in the lake. Was, it had been open technically a month when we had the first casualty. So developing the park, 1942-43. So the water system's in operation. So in 1942, the Eureka Community Association took the lead in discussing developing the area into a regulated park with some regulations around it so that it doesn't become what they later quote as a barren waste. Got to put some control on this. So they did a special election was held on April 20th to authorize the city to levy a park tax not to exceed 20 cents per $100 valuation. They said their funds will be used to preserve the lake area as a park, general maintenance and care, prevention of erosion, planting of trees and shrubs, all that maintenance that goes into maintaining a lake and lake grounds for recreation, constructing a boat pier, picnic benches, driving and parking areas. And even at that time in 43, they were saying they were eventually hoping for a bathhouse and beach area. So that did pass 231 to 132, which, actually there's a little bit of a closer vote there. Other things, May and June of 43, local Boy Scouts did plant trees around the lake, so we have them to thank for some of the trees that are existing. And then sadly, the second drowning occurred in late June of 43, so a year later or 1 year after the first drowning. And this time it was George Bloom. He was a 34-year-old trucker and father of 3 children. He was passing through with Dixon Transportation Company. 2 men and their wives, I guess, were passing through, and they decided to take a swimming break, and he was attempting to swim across the lake with his friend and was not able to make it. And his friend then tried to, get him. I think the friend almost drowned too, but anyway, sad situation. So that was our second death, unfortunately. A favorite picnic spot, 1944. As we've got park regulations going, it just became a constant spot for people to gather. The spring, summer, and fall months, the journal was constantly reporting of picnics, reunions, parties, and more being held at the lake. In 1944, the lake became the kind of go-to spot for 4th of July picnics. We did not have a town-wide celebration at that point, but families typically planned their own family picnics or they took excursions to other towns. So, but a lot of people were getting out and enjoying the lake just as part of their, family gatherings. A diving pier was apparently in place by 1944, according to that article. Residents were definitely, as they interviewed people for this article, they were wishing for swimming markers, picnic tables, bathhouse, that was on their wish list that they would have liked to have had out there. The summer of 44, again, then we had our third drowning. So we're like at one a year since the lake opened, 42, 43, and 44. This time it was an 8-year-old that passed away. He drowned in about 6 feet of water. So early views from mid to late 1940s, thanks to the Davidson family, so supplies in these photos. So these would have been taken off Lakeview Drive, I believe, from your side, the north side of the lake, looking to, that one I would think on the right would be looking towards the east, kind of where the road starts, Lakeview Drive. And then also the grassy area there, completely, almost all undeveloped land there. There's additional pictures. I found a bunch of pictures on the McLean County Museum of History's digital archive. There's a statewide website called the Illinois Digital Archive, and the Pantograph gave McLean County Museum all of their negatives, and they scanned all those and put them online. So I've got a number of pictures in here that are from the Pantograph archive posted by the McLean County Museum. So here's a couple of kids with their hat and their shawl, fishing off of the stump. And this was a picture I was talking to you guys about earlier. I didn't know if it wasn't the one you were looking for. Okay. So this photograph, 1944, was taken on Lake Road, probably near the pumping station facing north. And it faces towards the Davidson family barns and such on the north side of the lake. So there's that. So the first actual community 4th of July was 1947. It was sponsored by the Eureka Community Association. There was food, games, contests, music, fireworks. And I can't wait to share this number with some of my friends on the Eureka Events Committee. A total of $500 was spent on the fireworks. Oh. I can't even imagine what they spend today. And no, it's not $500. So, anyway, so that was the very first one, 1947. The park continued to be developed with different activities and facilities in the late 1940s. In 1949, I found a little advertisement that there was a roller skating rink at the lake. So I'm assuming it was kind of like a tent structure or something, but lakeside roller rink, open on the evenings and the weekends. So I thought that was kind of cool. So on July 19th of 49, the fourth drowning occurred Robert Allen. He was 19 from Creve Coeur. So his body was recovered 3 hours later. So that was our fourth one. At least there was a little bit of a break there for a few years. So before it was like one every year and a bit. So 1949 was our fourth drowning. 1950, a bandstand and restrooms have been installed. And then the Eureka Community Association continued to have the 4th of July celebrations through 1956. And then they stopped. I think with all organizations, they get to the point where they're like, oh, we don't have enough money or manpower to keep this going. So they stopped in 1956 and they didn't resume again until 1962. So, going back to 1950s, there were repeated droughts. Despite the early success of the lake for the water supply in town, there were repeated droughts in 53 and 56, which caused low lake levels. In addition, the town was growing. There was an increased demand, also home water use just in general increased with, our washing machines and all the different things that we have. So water increased as well. So there were repeated droughts, and in the spring of 56, during one of those droughts, they decided to, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, seam the lake? Seam? We'll go with seam.
I think.
Same, anyway, so they dragged the lake to remove unwanted fish species. And there were a whole slew of pictures of this, so I thought that was really cool. So they were trying to find the unwanted fish species and get them out, so including shad and carp were the two that I saw mentioned in the article. Huge crowd gathered for this event, so lots of fun. So there is the low water level, they're removing the unwanted fish species. Our head area game warden was in charge of the operation with the Eureka Sportsman's Club hauling the net. So these are just different pictures of that process, going out in the boats with the nets, hauling it in. Some additional pictures where they're bringing the nets in, then it looks like they dump it into a thing and then they're sorting through it by hand. And like tossing out the back.
That's a manure spreader.
Pardon?
That's a manure spreader.
Oh, manure spread, so they were, what's a good place for it? Dump them all in there. So anyway, so that was quite the town event, I guess. So I thought it was fun finding those pictures. And then on the upper right too is another one of a gentleman fishing off the lake in the 1950s. In 1956, the city began fluoridating the water after a 250 to 50 vote. So that one passed pretty easily. Due to the droughts, a decision was made to find a deep backup well to feed the lake. So we've got the lake impounding system, but we need an additional well to feed the lake when the lake is dry, or when there's a drought and the lake level is low. We've got to have a backup well to pump water into the lake. So in 1957, test drilling was conducted and a good underground supply was found 2.5 miles southwest of the lake. In the fall of 57, contracts were made to dig that new well and then run pipe to the lake and install pump equipment. And in 58, the water plant was improved, doubling the pumping and treating capacity. And I love the picture of the old water treatment plant with the car in front. I remember that building, just, always driving by. I never saw the inside of it, but continued tragedies in the 1950s as well, unfortunately. On June 19th, 1954, the lake claimed its 5th victim with the drowning of a 6-year-old, Terrell James Kennedy of Eureka. So that was this article here. Following the tragedy in July of 54, so not even a month later, the Eureka Rescue Squad was organized in reaction to that. Previously, there was a rescue division within the fire department, but this was going to be a standalone organization specifically trained in water safety. As an independent volunteer organization, many fundraisers were held, especially that first year, to purchase the needed equipment. On the 4th of July, 1955, the squad took extra measures to improve safety, because that was a year after the previous drowning. They were hoping to avoid tragedy. Over the long weekend, the squad roped off a swimming area. There was no roped off swimming there, but they took it upon themselves to rope off an area to try to keep some control over it, and announced that the whole lake would be patrolled by motorboat and the swimming area by rowboat. They were also going to have a rescue truck on hand for the 4th of July that year. In January of 1957, ice skating was just officially banned. So no more ice skating. There's not that although I never found any drownings or anything associated with ice skating, but they did ban that pretty quickly. So rescue squad was on board now. They were getting trained. the bottom of that article on the right, the squad has taken about 5 lessons in water safety. So they really, that was their early first purpose, was protecting people at the lake. So, yeah,
I got a little tidbit.
yeah,
Before the new bridge on the west end, there was 3 large culverts there.
Mhm.
And that's where the water kind of bubbled up in the inside those culverts. And I guess the early well had a lot of natural gas in it.
oh, yeah.
So my dad has recalled that on occasion, somebody would light that gas in the tow, and it would sound like a cannon going
Oh
off.
my goodness.
But there were pipes up in those culverts where they pumped out of the well into.
I don't think anybody can get away with that. 1957, so the rescue squad was composed of about 12 men, and they voluntarily patrolled the lake on weekends and holidays during the summer months. Swimming was not sanctioned at the lake, but it was not prohibited either. 2 signs were posted warning swimmers that they swim at their own risk. And according to one article, there was kind of some barrels set out that, kind of indicated where, people could maybe swim. But officially it was not prohibited. There was no prohibition of it against swimming. So the next drowning that occurred, and this was the 6th death in the lake, was June 17th in 1957. 15-year-old Frances McClanahan drowned with friends, and they were swimming nearby. So they were not able to they had to do the Eureka Rescue Squad was doing dragging operations before they were able to find them. So that was June 17th, and immediately this death in particular, people really started rethinking, okay, should we have swimming here, or should we prohibit swimming? So discussion over whether swimming should be prohibited really ramped up. Some were in favor, but others felt that it would send youth to the gravel pits, which were much more dangerous. So they were kind of like, oh, we hate to have our youth, trying to find other places to swim. If swimming was sanctioned, the city would have to hire lifeguards and build a facility. And that was kind of where we're at in this, 2 sides of that. A city council member was reported to say that he felt the lake was too deep with too many drop-offs for safe swimming. He also said that although swimmers are not arrested, they are technically violating the water board's requirement that no one swim within a quarter mile of the water intake pipe. So at first it was kind of like, okay, I'm not sure if this was going to affect the policy or not. So this was June 17th, July 1st, not even a month later, the city council decided to ban swimming. So they banned it 4 days before 4th of July. Or 3 days before the 4th of July. So they quickly said, no, we're not gonna do this. The inquest for that, the 15-year-old that died, a coroner's inquest held, recommended, quote, that proper steps be taken immediately to assure reasonable safety for the lake or for the lake to be closed to swimming entirely. So pressure from that coroner's inquest, I'm sure the town at that point, we lost yet another kid from our town due to swimming, so they prohibited it. So July 1st, 1957 is when swimming was banned. The city noticed that the cost of establishing a beach, swimming area, and facilities to meet state sanitary regulations was just too prohibitive for them to consider at that point. So we head into the 1960s, so that was 1957. So about 3 years later, the Eureka Rotary Club says, no, they wanted to take that job on. Let's, have the club take on looking at what it's gonna cost to do a bathhouse, to do a beach, to do all these portions. So they completed a study of what requirements there were to meet, what the costs were, and they presented their plans to City Council in July 1960. Discussions and fundraising continued into 1961. By March of 1961, they had raised over $9,000, and the city agreed for the project to go ahead and start once the $10,000 mark was met. And so work began in June of 1961. So this picture on the lower right, I think, is if you're looking towards Lake Road from like where that beach area would have been. And the striking thing to me is that there are no houses. No houses on Lake Road at all. It just looks, I'm just like, that's just, interesting to see no houses over on that side of the lake. So the beach opened in 1962, June 21st. The swimming area was marked. The bathhouse included concessions and changing shower rooms. There was an admission cost. There was 15 cents for youth during the week and 25 cents on weekends. Adults were 50 cents. If you were from out of town, it was a slightly higher rate. So this was for the residents. The beach was open from 1:30 to 8:30 in the afternoons and evenings. And the mornings, it was reserved for swimming lessons by Larry Freeman. So, and I'm sure we all have stories about that. I know my siblings took swimming lessons in the lake. I didn't by the time I got around that, but I know my siblings did. So various pictures, again, newspaper prints are a little grainy, but yeah, beach, the bathhouse, everything was kind of getting up and going. Does anybody remember the beach and the bathhouse? Did the bathhouse have a roof? I had someone say that there wasn't a roof when they were in there.
Over the center part, but the showers, I think the showers were partially exposed.
Yeah, she said that.
Swimming lessons was like Navy SEAL training. Didn't matter if it was raining or if it was cold. I remember kids just blue coming out of it.
It's not always that warm out.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
And the fish bit.
Oh, yeah, a lot of fish fighting.
Keep going.
So these pictures here, there's the one color picture I thought of some swimmers at the beach in the 1960s. So we've got the Eureka Rotary Club got the beach going. So the Eureka JCs then stepped in as well to help out with things at the park. The Eureka JCs organized in 1951. In the early 1960s, they were involved with restocking the fish in the lake and stuff like that. Then getting in 1962, the JCs resurrected the 4th of July event. Those halted, I think, did I say 57? Somewhere around there. So 1962, the JCs took on that project. So in addition to the fireworks, they had a famous barbecue chicken dinner that was held every year with the 4th of July. In 1963, they built the pavilion that is still standing today. I saw one newspaper article reference that was on a high spot where allegedly discarded bricks from the city were buried. I don't know if that's true or not, but I saw a reference to that in the newspaper, so I thought that was interesting. The pavilion house, public bathrooms, but also the JC's clubhouse along with storage area and of course the kitchen stuff for doing their chicken dinners. They also donated playground equipment. So I like seeing the original plan in the thing. I thought that was cool. I was like, yeah, I recognize it. So they revived fireworks in 62. So, and they continued with the 4th of July celebrations for quite a long time. So I included just a couple of pictures from the 1960s of the fishing derby. So the fishing derby became kind of an annual event. And then I included two 1970 fishing, melodrama, country music, fireworks, all those fun things. Now my own personal lake story is 1970. My mom was 9 months pregnant with me, and her and my dad were part of the Eureka JCs. She was in charge of the JC's dinner.
Oh.
Like, who puts a 9-month-old pregnant woman in charge of the 4th of July food? So, but supposedly she managed the barbecue chicken dinner, that thing. They sat down to enjoy the fireworks. She says I kicked the whole time during the fireworks. I was born the next day.
Oh, wow.
And to this day, I hate fireworks. You will not see me out there on 4th of July. I will not go out there. So I kind of blame Mom on that, but just jokingly. So I included the one from 1970 because I thought that was just kind of a fun story. And I really don't know, asking a 9-month-old pregnant woman to do a barbecue chicken dinner, I don't know.
We're asking whether 9-month-old or 9-month-long pregnant wife would accept the job.
Yeah, I asked her about that, and she was like, well, that's just what we did. would, you know? I don't think anybody today would do that.
No.
We would just turn that down real quick. 1976, April 1976, the city council, voted to discontinue the use of the swimming facilities. So it started in 62, so about 14 years, for that swimming beach and facility in the bathhouse. By that time, there were high costs of needed upgrades. Things, just needed to be replaced and repaired. It's gonna cost a lot. By that time, the Eureka College Pool was being heavily used. And people were starting to put pools in their own backyards by then too. So the swimming discontinued in 76. That same year, interestingly, the city annexed the lake area. Before it, even though they owned the lake itself proper, they hadn't annexed the area around it to the city. So that happened about the same time. And at the same time as those things, we had our 7th drowning, and I think this is the one I think a lot of people remember more because it happened in the middle of the fireworks or not too long into it. So the 7th drowning occurred during the fireworks. Joseph Kelly, 21 years old from Morton, was just, I read somewhere that he was only like 50 feet out from the bandstand or something, and during the fireworks, and his canoe capsized. So they halted, they shut the fireworks down, everybody went home, he wasn't bound till like 6 a.m. the next morning, I think. So to my knowledge, that those are the only drownings that occurred. There were 7 then total from what I could find in the papers. And the last one was in 76. So that was a real pivotal year for the lake. In 1978, the Eureka JCs discontinued the 4th of July due to a lack of manpower and cost. A couple years later, though, they were able to resume it. 79 and 80, they got it together again, tried to do it. But again, 1981, there was just manpower shortages and costs, and they just couldn't keep it going. So there were no celebrations in 1982, but in 1983, the Eureka Lions Club was able to step up, and then they resumed hosting the 4th of July event from that point on. They probably hosted the event for a long time, up until only a few years ago, really. And they had additional city support and Eureka Sportsman's Club support for that. And then the city's event committee hosts event now. They started that 2017, 2018, somewhere in there is when they took it over. I'm not absolutely positive on the dates of that, but it's still obviously a huge, huge community favorite for everyone. And my kind of last slide, just to tie it up, there was just so much has happened since then. And so there's no way to go into all of it, but 93 to 94, expansion of the park with the addition of Lower Lake, with the walking paths, the ball diamonds, and the shelters. 94 to 95, construction of the new water treatment plant. I don't have a picture of it, but a really cool barn structure that's along 117. 2001 was the movement of the Dan Harder Bridge to Lower Lake Park. So it was a fun picture of that on the upper right-hand corner there.
Where was it before?
It is
I don't
on,
think I knew it had a name.
yeah, so it's on the road that I take to go home. So if you go out of town on 117, you take the first road to the left, is kind of opposite of Broom Road.
Mm.
And take that down there, and there's where the creek crosses, that was where it was. So just there, kind of between here and Sportsman's Club.
If you get going about 100 miles an hour, you can get airborne halfway through the thing.
You've heard.
So, 2002, the larger water tower was built at the lake. 2004, the disc golf course was added. 2014 was when I found the kayak obstacle race started. Expansion of the disc golf to 17 holes, and oh my gosh, the crowd that brings in now is just amazing. I don't think the people in 1941 could have ever pictured that in their head. 2018, of course, the draining of the lake and cleaning that out again, and then also the dog park was created right about that time. And of course, currently, they've got the $600,000 matching grant, and they are making all kinds of improvements to the trails and facilities, and really looking forward to the Charters of Freedom Plaza being open, which I think is pretty soon. Do you know, Lynn?
End of July,
It's gonna be in July,
yeah, after the 4th.
after the
They'll
4th,
come
okay,
in and I think the last half,
okay.
we got to it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Have they started putting bricks in?
No, they're not starting anything until after the 4th.
Which is probably wise. They had that going. So anyway, so more to look forward to there. So, just the evolution of the lake from, just it needed to solve a water issue to this amazing recreational facility. I'm really glad the voters approved it back in 1940, even though it was really hotly debated at that time. Some seasonal pictures courtesy of the Davidson family too of the lake. I don't know what the upper right-hand corner, what that one dated to, but it looks like 50s, 60s, somewhere in there. So it's really pretty picture though, I like it. And that's all I've got. Do you guys have any questions? If you have any questions online, you can unmute your phones. Let me see if I can get in there, and I don't know if I can do, unmute all, okay. So yeah, does anybody have any questions or memories to share?
You could add the skate park to
Oh,
your
yes,
presentation.
I didn't think about that.
What year was that? She was instrumental in
Yeah.
it.
That was probably really, popular for everyone as well.
2000 maybe.
2000, yeah, part of that, just that growth, we got into the 90s, 2000s, there's all kinds of things being developed out there.
Up where the playgrounds are in the upper part, used to be, several, horseshoe pitching areas with a little fence around the whole thing. That apparently was a huge thing for years and years and years.
I saw that referenced on 4th of July, different things, they would have horseshoe pitching contests and stuff, and 4th of July events.
$6 for first place. $6 for first place.
Maybe I'll
Is
bring
that
that
what I
back.
did?
Yeah. I think a lot of people would do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fun.
It looked like, if I remember right, I mean, there was a pretty hotly contested, competition out there,
Well, the lower park's a big area too, that wouldn't be there except for the lake, right?
Right, it probably wouldn't be
yeah,
developed
yeah.
the way it is without the lake being where it was at.
Yeah, that was just row crops wherever.
In the
And
city
tried to
dump.
City dump was back there.
Yes, and I kind of remember the city dump being back, in there. When I was younger, so. All right, well, that's all I've got for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.